Okay, we'll be ready to start the committee of the whole meeting in just a moment. Okay, if the board members can all make sure you have your microphones on, we'll start the committee of the whole meeting. Ready, Noah? Okay, good evening. The hour being 7:04 PM on Monday, November 11th, I'd like to call to order the Village of Brookfield Committee of the Whole meeting. Can we have a roll call for the committee, please?
Trustee Ketchmark?
Here.
Trustee Cote?
Here.
Trustee Hendricks?
Here.
Trustee Normatu is absent. Trustee Gahuli?
Here.
Trustee Kaluzny?
Here.
And President Garvey.
Here. Thank you, Noah. We have one item to discuss under regular business. We have proposed changes in or adoption of an ordinance creating a commercial filming policy within the village boundaries. We have a very detailed memo, as usual, here explaining this, but background in terms of how it came up. But Stevie, if you could maybe share with the audience more than for the board about how this came about and what you're suggesting or recommending.
Absolutely. I'm doing.
She has to film herself first. A real tight shot.
Thank you, President Garvey and Board of Trustees. We are discussing the potential adoption of an ordinance concerning commercial filming within village boundaries. We do not currently have a process codified, and we do get requests, and it seems as if the trend is increasing frequency of these requests. In the instance where we do get a commercial filming request, we work with the village attorney to produce a license agreement with the company, identifying and protecting village as far as pedestrian right-of-way, public usage, and safety as far as vehicle traffic and pedestrian traffic. So we are going to be discussing the potential for a ordinance. There are areas that staff is looking for specific direction from the board. Those are included in the memo of the packet. And if our slides are working, we'll be up with some visuals as well. So first item up for discussion and getting some direction on how we are identifying the process and if it is something we want to codify is the cost recovery element. Currently, when we get these requests, it is communicated interdepartmentally between our public works, police department, and fire department to ensure that we are taking a look at the use and requested use from all lenses to ensure that we have safety measures proactively implemented before we move forward with allowance. This takes staff time and coordination and effort, and if something is moved forward, the requests do involve staff safety or staff in attendance at site locations for safety procurement, closing off streets, and barricading any areas requested for use. So the cost recovery component for discussion is to determine if we want to assess those fees just individually, if we want to provide those proactively within an ordinance so that that accompanies, a fee schedule accompanies it, or if we want to not include those cost recovery fees, or if we want to recoup in some other way. So that is the cost recovery item up for discussion. Additionally, we also have what is going to be the catalyst for the process. If we would like to identify commercial filming through a permit requirement, that will also include identifying the fees appropriate and assign those, as well as other items in acknowledgement and assumed responsibility for communication to impacted area residents and businesses, as well as acknowledgement and agreement to insurance requirements and requirement of a site plan. Essentially, looking for direction on it, this is going to be a permitted process that is codified, or if we want to continue how we are doing it with individual license agreements, both of those to include how we are determining assessed fees as part of that process.
Thank you, Stevie. I'll open it up to the board. I mean, we could take either one first, because, I mean, whether we go with a permit or continuing the licensing structure on an individual basis, I mean, we do need to determine cost recovery, how we want to go about that, so. Discussion from the board?
I mean, I know that it said that you're looking at other communities and what their processes are, but that Riverside has a process already. In talking with Riverside, could you share a little bit more about why they went the way they did and
Yeah,
if they like it?
absolutely. Riverside, and this is going back over the most recent 2 decades, they frequently get and have received requests for filming to include motion picture filming and not just local commercial or national commercial type of filming. So that was codified within that community of Riverside due to the requests. They do provide a fee table as part of that code, and they do identify administrative fees as well as personnel and equipment fees. Additionally, they assess site location fees as well. There's a larger impact to a community space or a public space. There are higher fees assessed as part of their process. They did amend their code just this year to include a permit process. And that was just due to a learned process where some barriers and miscommunication came up, and it was easier to put that through a permit process where multiple departments are doing review rather than it only passing through the hands of a staff or village manager's office. So that is the reason contributing to that amendment for their code. There are other municipalities that our current attorney is working on in other areas not closest to us or necessarily comparable, but municipalities are doing this to protect the community within their boundaries and also to oversee a process to help proactively mitigate any safety issues or concerns that come up.
Thank you. I do agree that the fee table and having that clear makes a lot of sense whichever way we go. And then I think the pieces that you mentioned in the permit requirements regarding the acknowledgement of those, acknowledgement of the residents and businesses nearby, as well as the site plan. I assume they would have a site plan anyways, so that doesn't feel like a stretch to ask for. They would have a plan of where they're planning to film and who would be impacted in the area.
I agree. I think that this to me feels a lot like the special event permits, where it makes the policy clear, it makes it so that outside people can look and say, well, this is very clear what we need and what's expected. It lets staff know the policy as far as these are all the people who need to touch this. Just like we were saying, it probably prevents miscommunication. I think it makes sense to have the permit process, and it makes sense to have the fee structure.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with the permit process. And as we discussed over email earlier this week, that earlier this weekend, whatever, I'm on a roll. About the cost recovery, because filming does tend to cancel. They do cancel last minute, and then at that point, you might have already reserved overtime for police, union worker, all these things that are going on, that there should be some sort of cost recovery, and that was the only thing that I was concerned about.
Trustee Cote, to your point, we did just have a cancellation today of a license agreement we were working on for potential filming for Chicago Med here in the village boardroom. Staff time was taken. We did host that company to come and view the site, take pictures, multiple occasions, and they did cancel. So as it currently exists, they just walk away But the question of should there be a cancellation fee is not included within this memo, but it was a very good question that was brought up.
Yeah, and I'm concerned about it. At the same time, I don't want it to discourage filming. You know, we want to encourage filming, we want to bring it in, but at the same time, we can't constantly lose money in preparations and attorney fees, et cetera.
I agree with Trustee Hendrick's point. It's the predictability for the people that are doing it are professional companies that are doing it, and I would like to think they would expect or understand and know that there's systems in place and the predictability of having it. So I think getting it down on paper and making it clear ahead of time, the process is a good idea. And I agree with the cost recovery. I mean, staff time is very valuable. Is the figures that were translate from Riverside, do they translate to us? I mean, in terms of the police and fire time and everything else? Or is there recommendations on those in terms of what the cost should be?
Personnel is pretty comparable, and those are easy to identify. It is straight time. The administrative fees that would be assessed would depend on if this is going through the village manager's office or a permit process to make sure we include multiple department personnel on who will be touching this through that.
So just again, trying to build consensus. I mean, does everyone agree about cost recovery, that there needs to be an upfront menu and listing of the costs of this and how it goes?
Yes.
Okay. So now, going back to the next issue of whether it's permit process or, licensing is going forward, does staff have a record? I'll open up to the board. How does the board feel about that issue? Or is there a specific reference or recommendation from staff onto that issue? Whether we go like with the permit, that type of.
Staff recommendation would be taking that learning curve that our neighbors had to do to amend it to a permit process to codify this with a permit requirement process.
I'm in agreement with that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Agreed.
Everyone on the board agree that that's the approach? I mean, we appreciate, the guidance from Riverside in this, and obviously they've thought about, worked through it, and it seems to make sense. The board seems to agree that that's the route to go, so.
I think it's the most clear. It's a public process, and it's not like you have to make a decision every time.
The last question would be private property owners who are approached for filming. Would the board recommend that they too follow that permit process, even if it is not necessarily impacting public facilities?
I would.
I would say.
I would say yes, because we don't know if they're affecting or inadvertently affecting their neighbors and alleyways, et cetera. We don't know, so it'd be good to have a review. of
Well,
it.
because, in addition to that too, I think we were both involved with one of the filmings here
Amazon came and did it.
years ago. There's a lot of equipment that will park on the street. So it's not just, the interior of the home that would be affected. And I believe I saw in here too that there's a limit to the number of days that they can do filming in a private residence. So if that's correct, I think that's also a good idea. So it's not too prolonged, again, for the impact on the neighbors.
I think I would just want to clarify or make sure that it's not like if there's students at RB doing a film production that they're having to get a permit for their movie in their yard or something like that. There's some clause in there that's, I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine a gigantic production happening, but also I don't want to scare anyone that they can't do that kind of thing here.
But it seems like that one on the private property is a little trickier. So what if Tischler's wants to film some commercials inside their store? All the trucks are on their property. They don't need police help or DPW help. Would they be required to get a permit for doing that?
That is a very good question and a case study, which was why the question is being posed. Using a previous example, Tischler's was approached for filming on-site at their location within their private property boundaries. However, it did require street closure, and the village was not notified until the public right-of-way was impacted. So if we did not have a requirement for commercial filming permit for a private property owner, they could potentially never notify the village, and we're seeing more impact.
But doesn't that go to if it impacts public right-of-way or something? I mean, doesn't there need to be a little more detail as part of that? I mean, in this case, yes, they would have, I think, closed down part of Monroe or needed traffic control there. What if it was entirely on their property?
Oh, The
I'd say
language,
if
the
you were-
the language in the Riverside ordinance, I thought, on page 17 of our packet, I assumed that was the language that staff was asking for, and it says a permit shall be required by any person or entity to use of any street, right-of-way, or public building, equipment, or personnel for commercial uses in the filming. And then it says any property owner that consents to the use of their property in connection with commercial filming shall ensure the person or entity performing it have to apply for the permit. So I just assumed that language, any use of the street, right-of-way, or personnel would, if the project impacts our right-of-way, our streets, or any involvement of any personnel, whether it's for traffic control or anything else, that they would be required a permit. Is that the intention?
That is the intention, as well as the communication and notification to the village. While a commercial filming company may let a private resident or business owner know that it is going to be confined to their private boundaries, review and discussion and notification to the village can assist with identifying if there's other proactive measures that need to be taken.
So I guess the question is, does that require a permit to do that, or is it just a requirement of the process that they
Right.
notify the village?
Yeah, if they're not impacting a right-of-way, is it just a notification and not a permit fee?
Or maybe there's more of a penalty if they don't notify, and then there is an issue.
I would say it would be better that we know, and we wouldn't structure a permit fee so that it would prohibit or create a barrier to people wanting to film or access.
I guess the point I was trying to make is, yes, we do want to know what's going on because we don't want to be surprised and find out that it does impact our streets. But at the same time, you could have something at a much smaller scale that someone is filming a commercial within their store, and I don't see why we'd require a permit for that if it's not impacting village property or our village staff or whatever. There's different levels to it, I would think.
I guess, I go back to the language, I guess then it's just a matter of process, because if it's determined that they're not using any street, right-of-way, public building, equipment, or personnel for commercial use, then they wouldn't be required for a permit. But I guess the scenario, I think what staff's looking for is the commercial location to come forward and say, okay, we're filming a commercial, and if it's, I may be wrong, if it's determined that none of these things come into play, that they're not using any street, right-of-way, public building, equipment, or personnel are needed, then they wouldn't need a permit.
I would say that's fair, yes.
But then,
in the
How do you get to that point?
how do you get to, I guess that's the, how do they know that they've got to come forward? Is there a initial process they don't have to apply for the permit, or they have a consultation to determine if a permit is necessary? So if they come forward and say, we're filming a commercial completely within our business, we're not going to use any streets, anything else like this, is there any fee or anything charged or required?
I think the intent is to still follow that permit process and initial application and provision of a site plan. That way we can see and confirm where the location is going to be taken. We wouldn't be assessing a fee if there was no impact to public right-of-way. It wouldn't follow the structure of the fee table. So staff would recommend a permit be required for both commercial filming industry organizations as well as private business or residences, if that is something that is being invited and consented to be done within the village boundaries. Staff can work, once we receive that application, to determine if it is impacting right-of-way or public use. If it does not, and it stays solely within private property boundaries, we have that application on file just for tracking, and no fees would be assessed to that property owner.
It's probably tricky how you get the wording out there on that. That if there's a
This would be
permit
new to the
application
community,
process, there may
right.
be a fee, may not be a fee.
Right.
Again, it'll all just be about the communication in terms of getting it out there. And when, I mean, I'm curious as to sometimes how we are made aware of these, or if we're made aware, and I could see instances where we wouldn't be made aware, and then all of a sudden we see a bunch of trucks out on a street or anything like that. So again, just working through the normal channels of, social media, the local newspapers, the Chamber of Commerce, just try and get word out that this policy's in place. And then a lot of these companies, do it in multiple towns. I'm sure they may ask or check with the village hall or check with their website and know that this is in place and want to comply, so. But overall, the board seems to be in agreement about the cost recovery and that we should do it by a permit process and kind of mirror the language that our neighbors in Riverside use.
And I think per trustee Kaluzny's comment too, this is about professional filming. This is not about student
Correct.
films, yeah.
It refers to commercial filming throughout, so I assume that's defined. I didn't see the definition, but I assume that's defined as for profit, as opposed to a student project or anything like that, right?
And we can bring this back in its draft final form so that you, the board, can view the documents and.
That would be helpful. Anything else, any other direction you need from the board on this at this time?
No, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions from the comments on the board, Liz? So we're literally going Hollywood, all right?
Let's go.
All right, thank you very much, Stevie, and for everyone involved in getting us to this point. That ends the items we have up for discussion on the Committee of the Whole. I will once again open it up to public comment. Anyone on this side have any public comment? Anybody on this side have any public comment? Okay, hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to go into executive session pursuant to Section 2C5 of the Open Meetings Act to discuss purchase or lease of real property for the village's use.
So moved.
Second.
All right, help me out here. Who? Trustee Cote. Trustee Kaluzny was first, and Trustee Ketchmark was second.
Sure.
Stereo. Roll call, please.
Trustee Ketchmark,
Aye.
Trustee Cote,
Aye.
Trustee Hendricks,
Aye.
Trustee Gahuli,
Aye.
Trustee Kaluzny.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, we're adjourned into executive session at 7:27 PM. We will conduct an executive session in this room, so I ask that anybody not participate in the executive session